Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a little bit. I needed to, do a reset, take a breather, and just kind of come back to it at full strength and really continue to add value to this channel. So I'm so excited to be back, and I want to bring you into my designer journey, why I chose to be a designer, how it happened, and what brought me here. So before we get into that, make sure that you subscribe if you have not already and hit that notification bell so that you never miss an upload from me. Let's get into it. I am what you would consider, y'all, there is a gnat flying around here, and if you see me do like this, I'm trying to, in the most elegant of ways, get that thing out of my way. I want to start at the beginning and just kind of tell you a little background about my family. My dad was born and raised in Jamaica, and my mom was born and raised in the UK. So I was born and raised here, and having that sort of immigrant vibe instilled in you is something a little different. So I never was taught or encouraged to be a designer, but it still came through anyway. So my mom was a single mom, and basically with the help of my grandmother and my aunts, she was able to, raise me and my brother in a safe, enriched environment. My grandmother taught me to read. My aunts would listen to me read all of my Disney stories. I'm sure they've heard Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid so many times, they're probably sick of it. But throughout all of that, there was so much enchantment in my life in regards to my grandmother's sister, my grandaunt Elaine. Such a fashionable lady. She would like crochet her own swimsuits, and just kind of, she was the original inspiration for me style-wise. So she had this trunk of shoes, and they were like suede strappy sandals, just like heels, of all different types, colors, textures, and I would play in them. And I would go from my grandmother and my aunts, they have like a multi-family, and I would go from the first floor to the second floor in my heels with my Disney books. And I can remember that because I had fun doing it. But for the love of me, and I could be wrong, there could be some like photos floating around somewhere, I don't understand why no one ever took photos of this, because I'm sure that's just not something you see every day. This little possibly 5 or 6 year old, or even younger, going up and down, stairs in heels with, her Disney books. So that was definitely the start of it for me. I think why I was so attracted to Disney and why it impacted me the way it did is like transformations. So obviously there's an obvious transformation with The Little Mermaid. She goes from being a mermaid to being human. A transformation with Cinderella, going from being oppressed to kind of essentially being liberated. Even fashion wise, like you got to see her go from being literally broken down, ripped apart, her stepmother and her sisters just kind of ripping her dress to shreds, and then someone comes in and transforms her, and the dress is beyond all imagination, and you're just kind of like, wow, this is great. So for me, that was the fashion transformation, and I was just like in love with being able to put on an outfit and feel different and feel good about yourself. And that was exactly it. Cinderella didn't go to the ball looking for a dude. He found her. But she wanted to have a good time. She wanted to get out. She wanted to have fun. She wanted to be on the town. She wanted to experience different things. So as I got older, that was what I pulled out of it. Obviously, as a 5-year-old, you're not pulling all that out of it. But that was it. And even with Beauty and the Beast, it was a transformation of being able to love someone who was so like cruel and hard-headed and mean, and not thinking that they're deserving of love. That's deep too. But obviously that yellow dress and the enchantment of falling in love and the music, and just like, those are like my top 3 movies from when I was little. Fashion involved, transformations, and that's kind of, I think, where my designer bells started to ring. So probably when I was about 7 or 8, my grandmother bought me a toy sewing machine. And I'm gonna insert a photo of it. It looks really old. It was Singer inspired, and it looks like an old school sewing machine. But I started to understand the mechanics of it. I couldn't really sew anything. I think one time I even ran paper through it. I could barely thread it, but my posture and my want to learn was there. My grandmother worked for this older rich woman. She would give my grandmother things that either she didn't like or she was over or whatever like that. And when I tell you it was like Chanel perfume, Ferragamo bags, Chanel hats, jewelry, all these different things. And I was around all of this stuff when I was little, so it looked normal and it looked extremely attainable because my grandma had it. But as I got older, I would look at my grandma and I'm like, do you know what this is? Do you know how much this is? Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? And she wouldn't care. She was like, oh, you know, my boss gave it to me as a gift. And that was it. And I was like, but grandma, this is like, people aspire to have these things. And she didn't care. She didn't understand. But that was me falling deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. So fast forward to my fixation with Disney villains. Even though we were made to like love and emulate the princesses, I always had a thing for the villains. It started with Sleeping Beauty and Maleficent. It started with Ursula. I just thought she was so cool, and I thought she was cool. Obviously, like, she wasn't a good octopus. She wasn't a person, but obviously she wasn't like she didn't have good intentions, but I thought she was cool. Her makeup was always done. Her nails were done, like little things that I was drawn to, and I was like, well, she has it together. Even though she scared me when I was a kid, I still had a thing for Ursula. And then obviously Cruella de Vil. Fast forward to Glenn Close playing Cruella de Vil in the live action 101 Dalmatians. That just like, I started to want to be that girl. Not a girl who's trying to go around and kill puppies, but I wanted to own a fashion house. I wanted to work for a fashion house. I wanted to design. I wanted to take things from sketch, you know, to store. And I just got a high off of that process. So as I got older, going through high school, middle school, I started with styling because I didn't understand the basics of sewing, you know, sketching, pattern making, draping. I didn't understand all of it. I hadn't even heard what those things were yet. So I started with styling, and I'm talking like B2K concerts. I would go out with my friends and we would all just like plan our outfits. Sometimes they were DIY, and it just spiraled from there. High school, I mean, I was that girl who was hitting all the trends. I had the high-heeled Air Forces. I had, you know, the blinged out name belts, like the sunglasses with the little rhinestone hearts on the corner. Like whatever it was, I was into it, and I was all over it. So then That's So Raven hit, and that show had more of an impact on me than I thought it did when I look back, because it really spoke to me being full figured, or even just curvy, because I was just always curvy, but it spoke to me wanting to be a part of the fashion world but not being accepted because of my body and, you know, how I looked. And with That's So Raven and Project Runway, I just could not keep myself away from sketching. I couldn't keep myself away from putting on the newest episode of Project Runway and pretending that I was on the show and designing and coming up with ideas to take on those challenges and going through the show with those designers. And I can remember telling my grandmother for exit day of high school, I said, Grandma, I want to make a dress. I found the fabric that I want and I want to make it. And my grandmother's not someone who has a lot of patience. So she showed me how to make patterns, measurements, and different things like that. But she was very like quick about it. And I can remember sitting down, you know, putting down the project, going to sleep and getting up for school the next day and then coming back up. And she had already finished the dress. She'd lined it, she'd added straps, she added a zipper, and it was done. And I was excited because I was able to literally take something from sketch and it was created, but I wasn't a part of the process. Fast forward to college, I enroll, I choose a major. I was in love with Shakespeare at the time, and I said, hey, I'm gonna be an English major and I'm gonna be like my favorite teacher, Miss Williams, and I'm gonna teach the kids about Shakespeare. That fashion kept calling me back. It kept calling me back. I started getting into business, and I remember saying to my marketing professor, also Williams is her last name. I said to her, what do you think? Because I always like to get advice from women and just people I respect in general, because I always like to hear feedback. And I said to her, what do you think if I go to fashion school and then come back to finish my marketing degree? And she looked at me and she was like, you know, I've never heard anybody doing that, but if you're really passionate about it and you feel like this is something that's like grabbing at you and you want to do it now, do it. So I didn't have many people in my family supporting me. A lot of people were just kind of like, oh, maybe you should just be a nurse, you should be a doctor, you should be a teacher, you should be a lawyer, do something safe, you know. They're not gonna really pay attention to you in fashion. You're not gonna really be able to do this. You gotta be this, you gotta be that to succeed. And it just, I didn't really have a lot of support. However, I did have my mother supporting me, my boyfriend at the time supporting me as well. And I enrolled in a trade school called Wood Toby Coburn. Obviously, like, I wanted to go to FIT. However, FIT would not take me unless I already knew how to sew. And for me, like, I didn't even know how to like hem a pair of pants. So I was like, okay, like, where else can I go? Because I don't want to speed through that. Like, I want to learn how to like do that because it's necessary. So I enrolled at Wood Toby Coburn. This was fall of 2007. Yes, fall of 2007. It was the best decision I ever made. I learned everything: design and construction. I learned draping. I learned how to make patterns. I learned different stitches, different hems. I also learned computer aided design. So basically, beyond just learning how to sketch something out on what they call a croquis, which is just like a mannequin on paper for you to like draw your designs over, I learned how to do that also in Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. And it also taught me how to design patterns, which you'll see some of those, you'll see some of that happening with Joy Louise the Label designs that are currently on the website. I'll insert some photos so that you can see, or anything that I've done in the past where I've designed the prints myself and had them custom made. So I don't think that I would have learned all of that. Mainly like electives thrown out the window, because a lot of times colleges try to give you classes that really have nothing to do with what you're majoring in. Learning all of that, taking it with me, obviously, and when I say taking it with me, I mean like mentally, like logging it in Rolodex and committing it to memory. My first internship outside of college, design internship, was for Sean John. And I was placed with the senior men's wovens designer. And her name was Linda, and I'm still in touch with Linda. But Linda was very impactful for me, to where she gave me insight into what it was to design for someone. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do long term. And I could do it for some time, but I needed to give myself knowledge on how to do it for myself.